Welcome to Chalk Talk, a weekly preview of West Tennessee football featuring the JSUN sports team on JSUN.com.
Hey everybody, welcome into another edition of college football's Chalk Talk here on JacksonSun.com. I am Sun High School sports columnist Brandon Shields. He's our local college guy, Craig Thomas. And Craig, 3 games going on this week, one involving an SEC team, one involving kind of a decent-sized road trip for another team, for a couple more teams. But we'll start with Lane and kind of work our way out from there as far as West Tennessee geography goes. But Lane's got Kentucky State this week, right? Yeah,
Lane, home game, final home game of the year, just 3 this year, so kind of a tough schedule from the get-go as they sort of, transition coaches and everything like that. Been a little bit of a challenging season, for the Dragons. They've had a couple of tough weeks. I'll be honest, I didn't expect them to be real competitive against Miles last week. Miles is one of those teams that right now is just in a little bit better spot, and that was, a 27-point game. A couple things to note out of that game. Courtney Bush, the Liberty product, who we really hadn't heard a whole lot from the last few weeks, had I think 95 yards rushing. So I think that bodes well for probably for next season going forward, having a good, and another guy there that can help the running game, and obviously good for him too. But Lane's offense has been a struggle the last couple of weeks. Just some inconsistency as far as getting protection, some inconsistency as far as turnovers and decision making. I think when you look at the primary starter, Marcus Reynolds, and the sort of the main reserve guy, Terrence Ayers, you've got 2 guys that have done a couple good things here and there, have shown some ability, but just overall, Derek Burrows, I don't think feels like he can really trust either one of them full time to be the guy. They just really haven't proven that yet, unfortunately for the Dragons. That's not to say they're bad quarterbacks or that they don't have any future. It's just to say so far it has not worked out to this point, and that's, I think, a big reason why Lane's offense is struggling. But this is a team that's still trying to develop some weapons, I think, in the wide receiver spots. So that'll make a big difference. Defensively, I think overall, you generally have to be pretty pleased with Lane. I know one thing that Burrows has been upset with has just been their proclivity of giving up so many big plays. But when you just look at straight-up defense overall, they've done a pretty nice job, and they've had several guys. Justin Hill in the secondary, Blackman in the secondary, Gabe Mass up front. You look at Michael Craig at linebacker spot. Really several guys that have had a pretty good year for him overall. Javante Kelly is linebacker as well. So they've had some good individual performances and good team performances there on the defensive side. When you look at Kentucky State, this looks like a fairly winnable game, Brandon. Honestly, Kentucky State comes in with 2 wins. They've lost to a lot of the same teams that Lane's lost to, like Tuskegee and Miles and those guys. They beat Benedict, who Lane also beat. So you kind of get the sense, just we've played it out far enough now. You kind of see where these teams are, kind of middle bottom, I guess. Maybe just sort of. Maybe not the, neither one's probably the worst team in the SIAC, but they're kind of maybe just up a little bit from that. So this looks like a winnable game for Lane. I think given the way the first couple games at home have gone, that would be a really nice, sort of good feeling, kind of like we saw from Lane a few years ago when they sort of got things going there, I guess, in 2011 with some better performances at the end of the season. I think that this could be a kind of an opportunity to sort of jumpstart things for next year. Lane's not going to really do anything here with just a couple weeks left in the 2015 season, but I think Lane has some higher expectations for 2016, and a win, a good performance, I think would do a lot for everybody. And if you could finish out with 2 strong performances to end the year, that would definitely make people feel a little bit better, I think, than they do right now.
All right, well then Bethel is on the road this week. They are going to, is it Cumberland in Tennessee or Cumberland's in Kentucky? Cumberland in Tennessee.
Already been to the one in Kentucky. Hopefully for Bethel, this one will go a lot better than that one did. That was probably the toughest game of the season from just a lack of competition standpoint. But honestly, Bethel's coming off one of the tougher weeks of the year just because of what they could have done. 4-point loss to Faulkner on the road. Nothing to be ashamed of about that. I mean, Bethel's had much worse games against Faulkner in the recent past. But the fact that Bethel was up 25 points.
Oh gosh.
And let that thing slip away. I mean, you feel bad when you watch something like that, when you read about it, because this is a Bethel team that really could have used a win like that. That would have been really something to say, hey, we went to Montgomery, went to this Faulkner team that's been pretty good in the Mid-South, and went and beat them. And Bethel had it there for the taking. I think on the positive side, you have to be pleased that they got up in that position, that their defense didn't have those meltdowns like they had the week before against, what was it, Campbellsville?
Yes.
They avoided all that mess. On paper, this looked like another game that would be really, really difficult for them. but offensively they were pretty solid. Got all the guys that have been involved all year from a skill position standpoint. Kerry Sellers, Quincy Walden, Devin Raymer, all those guys had big games. What a year Quincy Walden's had. I mean, that guy's played really, really well. I mean, then he'll be definitely just really all three of those guys, but I think especially Raymer and Walden. I mean, you talk about looking ahead to next year. Those guys, if they have a big year for Bethel's offense and they can sort of get started a little bit faster, I mean, look out. I mean, they really could be, I think, much more of a threat in the Mid-South than they have been the last couple of years. But, going forward, this Cumberland team is 3-5. This looks like a fairly winnable game, not an easy win by any stretch, but a game that you think, kind of like Lane with Kentucky State, you look at some common opponents and you sort of size it up that way. And, I think you have to expect Bethel to be pretty competitive this week. They've been trying to get some people healthy. I think that'll make a difference. But I think they've learned a lot probably defensively. We knew going into this season, as young as that secondary was, they were going to have some tough moments. And I think that they've had some tough moments really across the defense. But overall, I think to finish out here the next few weeks with some strong performances, 0-2 in the division, 3-5 overall. Bethel's not looking really in a position to talk about playoffs or anything like that, but I think they are in position to talk about getting, finishing this season off strong and getting ready for 2016 in a better way. I think really that's probably the more realistic way to look at it at this point.
All right, well then also there is one final game. UTM is on the road this week. They go to Arkansas. And before you start breaking down this game, I have one question. If Toledo can beat Arkansas, and if Tennessee and Auburn can compete with Arkansas, can UTM compete with them as well?
It's just very tough. It's just a very tough situation.
I'm just saying, it's not that big of a stretch, I don't think.
Well, I mean, and I think that's probably an optimistic way of looking at it. A pessimistic way of looking at it, or I would counter a realistic way of looking at it, would be to see that Arkansas's offensive line is the biggest in the country. Oh, yeah. So it's going to be, it's going to be tough to get much pressure on the Arkansas quarterback and running backs back there. I think when UTM has played much better in the last 4 weeks than I think probably a lot of people expected out of them, honestly. I think they expected that in themselves, but I don't know that many people outside of that, core Skyhawk group really did, especially given the way the Ole Miss game went. I mean, they're not supposed to win the Ole Miss game, but it was such a nightmare that I think everyone just looks at that and kind of goes, well, this is not Martin's year. That's kind of the way I looked at it, to be honest with you. I thought they just had so many wholesale problems, but they've proven in OVC that wasn't the case. That really was more of just a bad day that it went down that way, and I don't think that's going to be repeated at all. First of all, Arkansas is not as good as Ole Miss, but second of all, I don't think UT Martin's going to have near that many issues as far as just not tackling, not being there in the right spots, missing.
Plus, it's not the first game of the year, so they're kind of used to it by now.
And when you look at last year, and one of the things I asked Jason Simpson about on Monday, you look at last year when they played Kentucky, the first game of the season, they got blown out. It was a mess. Then they played Mississippi State, who was far better than Kentucky was, much later in the season. They were much more competitive the way they're supposed to be.
Number one in the country at the time.
Yeah, absolutely. So they were clearly that was clearly a tougher competition than Kentucky was supposed to be. But UT Martin gave a much better showing, and that's more what I expect from them against Arkansas. I mean, I don't think they're going to come within 2 or 3 touchdowns necessarily, but I think they're going to have a much better showing. I think they're going to represent UTM a lot better. I've been kind of impressed with them the last few weeks. I thought that Jacksonville State would potentially kind of wear them out, and I thought that it was possible they would take a loss in one of those next 3 weeks against with Tennessee Tech, Tennessee State, and Murray. Mm-hmm. I thought that there could be a loss or two in that next group of 4. They won all those games. They rallied and made the Jacksonville State game very, very close. So they've been good in all 5 OVC games so far. It's kind of honestly a little bit disappointing the way this Arkansas game falls in. You almost kind of want to see them keep playing OVC teams and keep sort of building there. But I think Jay Simpson talked about a good game against an SEC team, even if it doesn't look ideal, can sort of help build momentum, and probably did last year when they went to Eastern Illinois. Won that game and had a nice finish to the season, but really more on the stake, more at stake, more on the line this time around. So, you come out of Arkansas with a decent performance. You got 3 games left to really do whatever you want. You can get in the playoffs. So, I think there's a lot to look forward to from UT Martin. I think if you're a Skyhawk fan, lots to be excited about. This team of the 3 locals we've mentioned has the brightest future for right now. They've got the most to play for in 2015.
All right, well, Bethel starts at noon. Lane, which is the game you'll be at, starts at 2. Mm-hmm. And UTM starts at 3. Mm-hmm. Is that going to be on SEC Network?
It will be, yeah.
I wasn't sure if it would be the SEC game or the CBS game.
SEC Network.
All right. But Craig will be at Lane at 2 o'clock. Follow him on Twitter at
JS Ryder Craig.
For updates throughout that game, probably some updates from Bethel's game as well, and updates from UTM's game after Lane gets done and he gets done doing post-game interviews and stuff. But good luck to your team, and thanks for watching this video, and thanks for reading Jackson Sun and JacksonSun.com.